I'm down for the CAC, so we're chasing 17 this morning, and we saw about 76 points stripped off the Draghis yesterday. The market looking for 37 out of the gates this morning. Let's get to David Costa, Dean at Robert Kennedy College, joining us from Zurich. Staying with us to our guest host, Richard Martin, out of Sydney. Well, first up, David, what was your take on what Mario Draghi said? Did we learn anything new?
Good morning. Well, I think the speech has been very positive because the language has been intentionally very decisive. And so we know that the ECB is ready to intervene, again, whatever it takes. Like a bit of, I think the speech echoed a bit what happened in 2012. So it has been a very strong support for the markets, which is still not decided what is going to happen to Europe. If Europe has really turned the corner this year. So I think that's going to be a very good signal, a very good support of the central bank, which remains and keep liquidity at high levels until we see an overall improvement in the economy, which is still, he recognized, he was a bit more cautious on his speech than Barroso. So he actually said that there is still quite a lot to do, and for that reason they are cautious and they're ready to act, and that's what pretty much the market are looking for at the moment.
Draghi outlined two different scenarios, one being if there was a tightening in short-term money markets, but also if the medium-term outlook on inflation changed. These could be the trigger points. But many analysts walked away and said they were still confused about what the catalyst would be. Do you think that confusion is warranted?
Well, I think it is natural to have a bit of confusion at this point. Particularly, one of the challenges which I see really in Europe is this transmission, monetary transmission mechanism between this high liquidity, which from the ECB is reaching the banks throughout Europe, and reaching consumers and companies, which, as we have seen from the data in November, for the 19th month in a row, is seen a contraction. So we don't see the money reaching the market yet, particularly small, mid-sized companies. And that is one of the reasons why unemployment remains very concerning in Europe, particularly unemployment for young unemployment or under 25 years of age. And that's a major challenge. So having this type of confusion at this point is quite normal, and there is still a lot of unclarity. But on the longer term, toward the end of the year, we're going to see hopefully this banking union coming through, and that's another factor which will increase stability and uniformity on the European banking market, which of course will stabilize also, will have an impact, will be transmitted to the economy, and we will see more loans, more coordinated approach to the banking problem, and also in the case of banking defaults, more of a unified policy.
David, it's Richard here. Do you think there's a chance they're going to go for quantitative easing in the euro area anytime in the next 6 months, particularly if the economy remains weak, to actually get out there and start purchasing assets?
I think that's a real possibility, and that's why I think the comments of Draghi overall have been very positive for the markets, because we see a central bank which is ready to do, once again, pretty much whatever it takes and act very decisively if that is the case. So I don't know if that is going to happen in the next 6 months. It's very difficult to time it out, but I see that if we see a situation where the inflation will drop further, or even a risk of deflation, which Draghi tried to exclude at the moment, if that is going to happen, I think quantitative easing in Europe is going to appear, and quite strongly. So I see a very strong determination of the central bank, which provides a certain degree of insurance to the markets that we are not left alone, but we have a lot of buffers, and we have this recovery, this low path to recovery, monitored by the central bank, ready to act.
Right, but David, given the rally that we've seen already in the European banks, how much is the ECB backdrop enough for investors to pile into them, in light of the fact that we don't really have a precise number on how much needs to be raised for capital raising?
Yeah, that is correct. We had a very big rise last year, and particularly banks have a big run-up. So you have to, this is the time to be selective in banks, to really look at opportunities, particularly in the peripherals economy where we didn't see this big jump. So whenever I see a market or a sub-segment of the market which is up 35% in the last year or so, I always try to be cautious. So that's not really a very exciting entry point. But there remains opportunities of those banks which are in countries where there is a overall negative sentiment still, and there could be opportunities there. But we had a big run-up, and of course being cautious is never a bad thing at this stage, given what we had in 2013.
Yeah, We also want to get down to our guest host over in Sydney as well. So, Richard, there's so much exuberance in peripheral Europe. Almost feel like the crisis is over, but at the same time, we're still dealing with a deflationary spiral. Private credit isn't really reaching the households or even companies as well. So, how are you viewing the developments, and how should investors deal with this European story?
Well, the big story, frankly, is the risk has dropped dramatically over the last year in Europe. And part of that was people piling back in, as David said, into bank stocks and all of that, as they could see the risk numbers dropping, and they assumed that that would play out in the earnings of banks and all of that. But we're still left with a situation that we're having trouble restarting the engine of growth in a large part of the euro area. It looks to be stalling in France. Even in places in some parts of southern Europe, it still looks weak, though thankfully the credit is starting to flow. At least sovereign bond issues are going through at better rates. So we've still got a year of hard work ahead of us in the euro area before we're going to get a real lift in the physical economy that's going to start to play out for companies.
Thank you so much for your time today. Richard Martin joining us out of Sydney. Also, David Costa was with us too, of Robert Kennedy College. Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. Let's get you set up.